This is one of the secret sites at Grand Canyon. I don't know how many times I've walked by this and never noticed it was here. This is the grave of Reese Griffith. It's the only official grave within the canyon. Mr. Griffith was a Park Service employee, born October 26, 1873, died February 6, 1922. Mr. Griffiths, age 48, was working as a ranger and at the time of his death was blasting the lower Kaibab Trail in the area of the Swinging Bridge, in the same location of the current Black Bridge. He set a pleasing charge, went back to inspect the blast results, and a rock fell on him, causing injuries that led to his death the same evening. He was described as, quote, terribly crushed and broken, close quote, but fighting valiantly to survive. There was a phone line from the inner canyon to South Rim, and Chief Ranger Smith headed down to Phantom, arriving at 11 p.m., about 15 minutes after Mr. Griffiths passed away. All of this account comes from a book written by Smith's wife, published in 1930, entitled I Married a Ranger. Mr. Griffith's body was left with two fellow Mormons who sat with him through the night. Now, this is where the burial gets mysterious. This is the only official burial site within the canyon. Of course, there are thousands of burials of Native people at Grand Canyon, as well as a number of unofficial graves. But this is the only official grave permitted since the park was formed in 1919. The Park Service is oddly parsimonious with burials at Grand Canyon. They shut down the Grand Canyon Cemetery in 2017 because it was full, despite administering a 1.2 million acre park. They ended permission to spread cremains in the park in 2023. Even the 1956 air crash site, where 128 victims of an air crash perished, is closed to public access. The Park Service is not liberal in allowing burials in the canyon, and there was a mysterious exception made here. So, why was Mr. Griffiths so quickly buried in the depths of the canyon? And why is he the only one of all the deaths that occurred at the canyon to be buried there? At first, it occurred to me that either he was a loner whose sole relationship was with the canyon and special dispensation was granted to bury him in the place he loved, or the other explanation was the body was so mangled that the rangers did not want to send it to his relatives, perhaps to avoid trauma, or perhaps to avoid the likelihood of a lawsuit against the Park Service. The fact that Mr. Griffiths was a Mormon makes the loner story less likely, but still possible. A little research shows that Mr. Griffiths had a wife and 5 children, the eldest of whom was 21 at the time of his death, and the youngest of whom was a boy of just 13. Mr. Griffiths was 48 when he died. The customary and legal ownership of Mr. Griffiths' body belonged to his wife and children, plus his 7 siblings were likely concerned as well. Something caused the Park Service to override these natural legal interests and to make a mysterious exception in this case. But perhaps he was a lapsed Mormon who was married to the canyon. At the time of his death, he lived in a room at the ranger's residence with his dog, who was waiting to join him down in the canyon. Also odd was the fact that at the time of his death, he was wearing a money belt with $290 in it. That's about $5,000 in today's money, more than 10 weeks of wages. Now, the Chief Ranger did describe Mr. Griffiths as a man of sterling character, and Mr. Griffiths seemed well respected and liked. Nonetheless, Mr. Griffiths was buried just off North Kaibab Trail, about 500 feet northwest of Swinging Bridge, which has been replaced by the Black Bridge. The plaque at his grave notes that he died in the Grand Canyon that he loved so well. One thing you've probably noticed is the considerable pile of rocks on Mr. Griffith's grave. Why? Well, Mr. Griffith was buried in a wooden coffin crafted in just a few hours. The coffin and the body would decompose over time, leading to settling. The rocks would slowly compact the soil as this occurred, avoiding the appearance of a sunken grave. Second, the pressure on the ground would discourage burrowing animals. Finally, the rocks serve as a marker of the grave, as the brass plaque was likely installed years later. Plus, there are some reports that the large number of stones indicates the importance and respect accorded to the deceased. More than 100 years have passed since Mr. Griffith's death, and the answer to why this, the only official burial in the depths of Grand Canyon, was allowed will never be known. So we're left to just speculate as to the reasons as we stop to visit the grave of Reese Layden Griffiths. Here lies Reese B. Griffiths, trail foreman, National Park Service, born October 26, 1873, died February 6, 1922, in the Grand Canyon he loved so well, as a result of injuries received near this spot while in the performance of his duties in building the Kaibab Trail. Rest in peace, Mr. Griffith.